I stood frozen on my porch as our HOA president, Karen Miller, blocked the ambulance from saving my neighbor Linda Thompson. Her obsession with rules cost a life, and now our entire community is paying the price. My name's Michael Bennett, and I've been living in Maple Grove Estates, a pristine gated community in suburban Charlotte, North Carolina, for the past 5 years. If you've ever dealt with an HOA that's more about control than common sense, you're going to want to hear this story. It's a roller coaster. Have you ever had a Karen in your neighborhood who took things way too far? Drop a comment below. It all went down on a bright Tuesday morning in late September 2024. I was on my front porch, sipping my black coffee and soaking in the usual Maple Grove scene. Kids riding their bikes to the community playground, retirees walking their dogs, and the faint buzz of lawnmowers keeping our lawns perfect. Maple Grove Estates is the kind of place where every house looks like it belongs on a postcard. Matching mailboxes, HOA-approved holiday decorations, and strict rules about where you can park your truck. I've always liked the order of it all, but there's a catch. Karen Miller, our HOA president, who runs this place like it's her personal kingdom, clipboard in hand and a rule for everything. That morning, I saw my neighbor Thompson sprint out of his house across the street, his face white as a sheet. He was clutching his phone, his voice shaking as he shouted, "She's not breathing." My stomach dropped. Tom's wife, Linda, a 72-year-old sweetheart who always slipped me an extra slice of her famous pecan pie at neighborhood potlucks, was in trouble. I set my coffee mug down hard, the handle cracking against the porch railing, and bolted toward him. "Tom, what's going on?" I called, my voice tight with worry. He didn't even look at me, his eyes wild with panic. "It's her heart. She's having a heart attack." I called 911. Within minutes, I heard sirens approaching our gated entrance. Relief washed over me. Help was here. But then I looked down the street and saw Karen Miller standing at the gate, arms crossed, her usual scowl etched deep into her face. She was in her HOA uniform, a navy blazer with the Maple Grove logo, khaki pants, and a visor that screamed, "I'm the boss." The ambulance screeched to a stop, its lights flashing red and blue, but Karen didn't move an inch. She started waving her clipboard at the paramedics, yelling something I couldn't make out. I ran toward the gate, my sneakers pounding against the pavement. Tom was right behind me, his voice breaking as he shouted, "Let them in, Karen. She's dying." But Karen turned to us, her tone icy. "They don't have the gate code, and they're not on my clearance list. Rules are rules." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Was she for real? Linda was fighting for her life, and Karen was worried about a gate code? The paramedics, a young woman named Sarah Johnson and her partner, Mike Davis, jumped out of the ambulance, their faces a mix of urgency and disbelief. Sarah, with her bright red paramedic patch on her sleeve, pleaded with Karen. "Sir, we're responding to a 911 call. A patient is in cardiac arrest. We need to get in now." But Karen shook her head, her voice getting louder. "I don't care who you are. No one enters Maple Grove Estates without proper authorization. Call your supervisor and get the code." I felt a surge of anger I hadn't felt in years. I've always tried to keep the peace with Karen, paying my HOA fees on time, making sure my grass never grew past the regulation 3 inches, but this was crossing a line. "Karen, this is ridiculous," I yelled, stepping closer. "Linda needs help now, not after you check your list." Karen turned her glare on me, her eyes narrowing. "Michael, this doesn't concern you. I'm protecting our community. We've had issues with unauthorized vehicles before. Last year, someone posed as a delivery driver and stole Mrs. Peterson's patio furniture." Tom's face turned beet red, his voice cracking with desperation. "My wife is dying, and you're talking about patio furniture? Move, Karen." He tried to push past her, but Karen stepped right in front of him, blocking the gate with her body like a human barricade. The paramedics exchanged a frantic look. Sarah grabbed her radio, calling for backup, while Mike started unpacking their gear right there on the sidewalk, as if they might have to treat Linda through the bars of the gate. I stood there, my heart racing, watching the seconds slip away. Every moment felt heavier than the last. I could hear Tom's choked sobs, Sarah's urgent radio chatter, and Karen's relentless lecturing all at once. How had our perfect little neighborhood turned into this chaos? And more importantly, would Linda make it through Karen's rules? I couldn't tear my eyes away from the gate, where Karen Miller stood like a statue, her clipboard clutched like a shield, while Tom's pleas echoed in the morning air. Karen, please, he begged, his voice raw. She's all I have. But Karen's face didn't soften. She just kept repeating, rules are rules, as if that justified everything. I felt a knot tighten in my chest, a mix of rage and helplessness. I've never been one to lose my temper, but in that moment, I wanted to shove that clipboard out of her hands and open the gate myself. Sarah, the paramedic, was on her radio, her voice sharp with urgency. We're at Maple Grove Estates, patient in cardiac arrest, but we're being denied entry. We need immediate clearance. Her partner, Mike, was pacing, his hands clenched into fists. This is insane, he muttered, loud enough for me to hear. We're losing time. I glanced at Tom, who had dropped to his knees, his hands covering his face. I knelt beside him, my voice shaky. Tom, we'll get them in. We'll fix this. But even as I said it, I wasn't sure I believed it. Meanwhile, across the street, my neighbor Emily Carter had stepped out onto her lawn, her phone in hand. I didn't notice her at first, but she was recording everything, the ambulance's flashing lights, Karen's rigid stance, Tom's desperate cries. Emily's a single mom, always juggling her 2 kids and a remote job, but she's also the kind of person who knows how to rally the neighborhood. I could see her hands trembling as she zoomed in on Karen, muttering to herself, "This is unreal. People need to see this." Later, I learned that Emily uploaded that video to our community's private Facebook group, and within an hour, it had been shared 47 times, racking up over 300 comments. But in that moment, all I could focus on was the chaos unfolding in front of me. Back at the gate, I tried reasoning with Karen again. Karen, you know Linda, she's lived here for 15 years. She's not some random intruder. Let them in. My voice cracked, and I could feel my hand shaking. Karen turned to me, her eyes cold. Michael, I'm doing my job. If I let every sob story through this gate, we'd have no security at all. What if they're not even real paramedics? I need verification. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Verification? While a woman was dying. Tom stood up, his face twisted with anguish, and lunged toward the gate, trying to force it open. Move, Karen, he shouted, but Karen pushed back, her body blocking the entrance. You're not authorized to touch this gate, she snapped. I grabbed Tom's arm, pulling him back before things escalated further. Tom, don't, she's not worth it, I said, my voice low. But inside, I was screaming. Every second Karen wasted was a second Linda didn't have. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, but was probably only 6 minutes, Sarah's radio crackled with a response. Clearance granted. Open the gate now. Sarah looked at Karen, her voice firm. We're going in. Karen hesitated, her lips pursed, but she finally stepped aside, muttering, this isn't over. The gate creaked open, and the paramedics rushed through, their gear clanking as they sprinted toward Tom's house. I followed close behind, my heart pounding, hoping against hope that they weren't too late. But when we reached Tom's front door, the scene inside shattered me. Linda was lying on the living room floor, her face pale, her eyes closed. Sarah dropped to her knees, starting CPR immediately, while Mike set up the defibrillator. Come on, Linda, stay with us, Sarah whispered, her hands moving rhythmically. Tom stood in the corner, his hands pressed against his mouth, tears streaming down his face. I wanted to say something, anything, to comfort him, but the words wouldn't come. All I could do was watch, my chest tight with dread. After what felt like forever, Sarah sat back, her shoulders slumping. She looked at Mike, shaking her head. She's gone, she said quietly. Tom let out a guttural sob, collapsing to the floor. No, 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 he cried, crawling toward Linda's body. You were supposed to save her. Sarah's eyes filled with tears as she placed a hand on Tom's shoulder. I'm so sorry. We did everything we could, but we needed more time. I felt my knees buckle. More time. The time Karen had stolen with her rules. I stumbled outside, my vision blurry with tears. I couldn't process it. Linda, the woman who'd welcomed me to Maple Grove with a homemade pie when I moved in, was gone. And it was because of Karen. I looked down the street and saw her still standing at the gate, scribbling something on her clipboard as if nothing had happened. Rage boiled inside me, but I was too overwhelmed to confront her. Instead, I pulled out my phone and saw a notification from the Maple Grove Facebook group. Emily's video was already blowing up, with comments like, "This is outrageous," and "Karen needs to go." I felt a flicker of hope. Maybe the community would finally stand up to her. At the same time, inside her house, Emily was on the phone with a local news station, her voice shaking with anger. Yes, I have footage of our HOA president blocking an ambulance. A woman died because of it. You need to cover this. I didn't know it yet, but Emily's call would set off a chain reaction that would change Maple Grove forever. As I stood there, staring at the ambulance parked in front of Tom's house, I couldn't shake the guilt. Could I have done more? Could I have stopped Karen? The weight of that question pressed down on me, and I knew this was only the beginning of the storm. I couldn't sleep that night. The image of Linda's lifeless body burned into my mind, and Tom's broken sobs echoing in my ears. I kept replaying the moment Karen blocked the gate, her voice cold and unyielding. Rules are rules. How could someone be so heartless? By the time the sun rose on Wednesday morning, I was already on my third cup of coffee, scrolling through the Maple Grove Facebook group on my phone. Emily's video had exploded, over 1,200 shares and 800 comments in less than 24 hours. People were furious. Karen Miller needs to resign. One comment read, "This is a disgrace. HOA rules shouldn't cost lives," wrote another. I felt a surge of validation. We weren't alone in our anger. At the same time, across town at the Channel 7 newsroom in Charlotte, a producer named Jessica Harper was watching Emily's video on her laptop, her jaw clenched. "This is a story," she said to her team, already dialing Emily's number for an interview. "A woman died because of an HOA gatekeeper. We're running this tonight." I didn't know it yet, but by 6 p.m. that evening, Linda's story would be the lead segment on the local news, with Emily's shaky footage playing on a loop. The headline? HOA rules turned deadly, a community in crisis. Maple Grove Estates was about to become the talk of North Carolina. Back in the neighborhood, I stepped outside to clear my head, but the air felt heavy with tension. Neighbors were gathered in small clusters, whispering to each other as they glanced toward Tom's house. A black ribbon now hung on his mailbox, a quiet tribute to Linda. I walked over to check on him, my heart pounding with every step. When Tom opened the door, his eyes were red and swollen, his voice barely a whisper. "She's gone, Michael," he said, his hands trembling. 52 years of marriage, and I couldn't save her. I felt a lump in my throat as I pulled him into a hug. "I'm so sorry, Tom. This isn't your fault, it's Karen's." He nodded, his jaw tight. "I want justice for Linda. I can't let this go." As we stood there, I heard a commotion down the street. A group of neighbors was heading toward the Maple Grove clubhouse, where Karen had called an emergency HOA meeting to address the incident. I looked at Tom. "You up for this?" I asked. He wiped his eyes, a flicker of determination in his gaze. "Let's go." We joined the crowd, about 40 residents strong, filing into the clubhouse. The room was usually a place for potlucks and bingo nights, with its polished wood floors and framed photos of past HOA events, but today it felt like a courtroom. Karen stood at the front, her navy blazer pristine, her clipboard still in hand. She looked unruffled, as if she hadn't just caused a tragedy. "Thank you for coming on short notice," she began, her voice clipped. "I understand there's been some concern about yesterday's events, but I assure you, I followed protocol to protect our community." A murmur of disbelief rippled through the room. I felt my blood boil. Protect our community? By letting Linda die? Before I could stop myself, I stood up, my voice shaking with anger. "Karen, you blocked an ambulance. Linda died because of your rules. How can you stand there and act like that's okay?" The room erupted in agreement, neighbors shouting over each other. "She's right, Michael," called out Mrs. Davis, a retired teacher who lived 2 doors down. "My husband has a heart condition. What if this happens to us?" Another neighbor, a young dad named Ryan, added, "We pay HOA fees for safety, not to be trapped behind a gate." Karen's face turned red, but she didn't back down. "I understand your emotions, but we've had security issues in the past," she said, her tone sharp. "Last year, a car without clearance drove through and damaged Mr. Larson's mailbox. I was ensuring that didn't happen again." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. A mailbox? She was comparing a mailbox to a human life? Tom stood up beside me, his voice trembling but firm. "My wife is dead because of you, Karen. You don't get to hide behind protocol." The room fell silent, the weight of Tom's words hanging in the air. Karen opened her mouth to respond, but no one wanted to hear it. "Resign," someone shouted from the back. "Step down, Karen," another voice chimed in. I felt a surge of pride for my neighbors. We were finally standing up to her. But Karen raised her hands, trying to regain control. "This meeting is adjourned," she snapped, storming out of the room. I watched her go, knowing this was far from over. As we left the clubhouse, I pulled out my phone and saw a text from Emily. "Turn on Channel 7, now." I rushed home with Tom, flipping on the TV just in time to see Jessica Harper's report. There was Emily's video, followed by an interview with Sarah, the paramedic, her voice breaking as she said, "We could have saved her if we'd gotten there sooner." The segment ended with a shot of Maple Grove's entrance gate, the reporter's voiceover asking, "When do HOA rules go too far?" I looked at Tom, his eyes wet with tears. "They're talking about Linda," he whispered. "Maybe now people will listen." That night, I sat on my couch, my mind racing. I couldn't let Karen get away with this. I started a group chat with Emily, Ryan, Mrs. Davis, and a few others from the meeting. "We need to do something," I typed. "Let's organize a petition to remove Karen and change these rules." Emily replied immediately, "I'm in. Let's make sure this never happens again." I felt a spark of hope, but also a heavy responsibility. Linda's death had lit a fire in Maple Grove, and I was ready to fight for justice, no matter what it took. I woke up Thursday morning with a fire in my chest, the kind of determination I hadn't felt since I coached my son's Little League team to the championships back in 2018. Linda's death wasn't just a tragedy, it was a wake-up call, and I wasn't about to let Karen Miller's rules hurt anyone else in Maple Grove Estates. I grabbed my phone and saw our group chat buzzing with messages. Emily had already designed a petition on her laptop, titled, "Remove Karen Miller and Reform HOA Rules," and shared a link with the group. "Let's get 100 signatures by the end of the day," she wrote. I replied, "I'm on it," and headed out the door, a stack of printed petition forms in hand. As I walked through the neighborhood, knocking on doors, I could feel the energy shifting. Mrs. Davis, the retired teacher, signed immediately, her hands trembling with anger. "I've been saying for years that Karen's too controlling," she said, her voice sharp. "She fined me $50 last summer because my roses were too pink for the approved color palette." Down the street, Ryan, the young dad, added his name to the list, his toddler clinging to his leg. "My wife's pregnant," he told me, his jaw tight. "If something happens to her and an ambulance can't get through, I'll never forgive myself for not speaking up sooner." Every signature felt like a small victory, a step toward justice for Linda. At the same time, inside the Maple Grove clubhouse, Karen and the HOA board were holding a closed-door meeting, their voices low but tense. I found out later from a friend who works as a janitor there that Karen was pacing the room, her blazer unbuttoned for once, her face flushed. "This is a PR nightmare," she snapped at the board members, who sat around the polished conference table, their coffee cups untouched. "That video is everywhere, Channel 7, social media. Even my sister in Raleigh saw it." One board member, a quiet accountant named David Brooks, spoke up nervously. "Maybe we should apologize, Karen. People are furious." But Karen shot him down. "Apologize? That's admitting fault. We followed protocol. If we back down now, we'll lose all authority." I wish I'd been a fly on the wall to see her squirm, but knowing she was rattled gave me a flicker of satisfaction. Back in the neighborhood, I met up with Emily at the community park, where she'd set up a small table with a sign that read, "Justice for Linda Thompson." A crowd of about 20 residents had gathered, some holding homemade signs with messages like "HOA reform now" and "Let ambulances in." Emily's kids, 8-year-old Sophie and 6-year-old Ethan, were handing out flyers, their little faces serious. "We're helping Miss Linda," Sophie told me proudly, and I felt my heart swell. This wasn't just about us adults, it was about the future of our community, for our kids and grandkids. By noon, we collected 127 signatures, more than I'd hoped for. I texted Tom to let him know, and he replied, "Thank you, Michael. I'm meeting with a lawyer this afternoon." That gave me an idea. I wanted to be there for him, to make sure he had all the support he needed. I drove to his house, a modest 2-story with a garden Linda had loved tending, and we headed downtown to meet his attorney, a sharp woman named Rachel Carter. Rachel's office was in a sleek building on Trade Street, with a view of the Charlotte skyline. She greeted us warmly, her gray suit crisp and her handshake firm. "I've seen the news," she said, her voice steady. "What happened to your wife, Mr. Thompson, is unacceptable. I believe we have a strong case for a wrongful death lawsuit against the HOA." Tom nodded, his hands clasped tightly in his lap. "I just want to make sure no one else goes through this," he said, his voice breaking. Linda deserved better. I felt a lump in my throat as I added, "We all do. Karen's rules are a danger to everyone in Maple Grove." Rachel leaned forward, her eyes intense. "I agree. We'll argue that the HOA's policies created an environment where emergency services were obstructed, directly leading to Mrs. Thompson's death. I'll need statements from you both, as well as the paramedics and any witnesses." I thought of Emily's video, now viewed over 10,000 times online, in the growing pile of signatures. "We've got a whole community behind us," I told her. "We're not backing down." As we left Rachel's office, I felt a mix of hope and exhaustion. The fight was just beginning, but seeing Tom's resolve strengthened mine. On the drive back, my phone buzzed with a news alert. Channel 7 had aired a follow-up story, this time interviewing Sarah, the paramedic. "I've been a paramedic for 7 years," she said on screen, her voice trembling. "I've never been stopped from saving a life until that day. It haunts me." I gripped the steering wheel tighter, my knuckles white. Sarah's words hit me hard. They echoed my own guilt. I should have done more to stop Karen. But now, I had a chance to make things right. When I got home, I found Emily at my door, her laptop open to the petition site. "We're up to 200 signatures, Michael," she said, her eyes bright with excitement. "And a reporter from the Charlotte Observer wants to interview us tomorrow." I smiled for the first time in days. "Let's do this," I said, feeling the momentum building. Maple Grove was waking up, and Karen Miller was about to face a reckoning she couldn't ignore. I couldn't believe how fast things were moving. By Friday morning, our petition had ballooned to 450 signatures, and the Charlotte Observer had published a front-page story titled, "Maple Grove Estates in Turmoil. HOA Rules Under Fire After Tragic Death." I stood on my porch, holding the newspaper in my hands, my heart racing as I read the opening line. "A 72-year-old woman's death has sparked a revolt in a Charlotte-gated community, with residents demanding change." Emily's video was embedded in the online version, now with over 50,000 views, and the comments section was a storm of outrage. "This HOA president needs to be held accountable," one reader wrote. "How can rules be more important than a life?" another demanded. I felt a surge of pride. Maple Grove was finally being heard. At the same time, inside the HOA clubhouse, Karen and the board were scrambling to control the narrative. I got the details later from David Brooks, the accountant on the board who'd started to crack under the pressure. He'd slipped out after their meeting and called me, his voice shaky. "Michael, it's a mess in there," he admitted. "Karen's trying to spin this as a misunderstanding, but no one's buying it. She's drafting a statement saying the HOA isn't liable, and they're hiring a PR firm to clean up the mess." I clenched my jaw, anger bubbling up. A PR firm? While Tom was grieving his wife, Karen was more worried about her image. "Thanks for the heads up, David," I said. "You should think about which side you're on." He didn't respond, but I could tell he was starting to waver. Back in the neighborhood, I met Emily at the park again, where our little table had turned into a full-on rally point. Over 60 residents had shown up, some with signs, others just to talk. Mrs. Davis brought a tray of homemade cookies, her way of keeping spirits high, while Ryan's wife, Jessica, handed out water bottles, her baby bump visible under her sundress. "We're with you, Michael," she said, her voice firm. "This is for our family's safety." I nodded, feeling the weight of their trust. Sophie and Ethan, Emily's kids, were running around with flyers, chanting, "Justice for Miss Linda." Their energy was infectious, and for the first time since Linda's death, I felt a real spark of hope. I pulled out my phone to check the petition, 512 signatures now. Emily grinned, her eyes shining. "We're making waves, Michael. The reporter from the Observer wants to follow up with Tom tomorrow." I glanced across the park, where Tom was sitting on a bench, staring at the ground. I walked over, sitting beside him. "How you holding up?" I asked softly. He sighed, his hands clasped tightly. "I miss her so much, Michael. But seeing everyone come together, it's what Linda would have wanted." I put a hand on his shoulder. "We're going to make this right, Tom. Rachel called. She wants us at the courthouse Monday for the first hearing." That afternoon, I drove to the courthouse with Tom to meet Rachel and prepare. The Mecklenburg County Courthouse was a towering building downtown, its marble steps bustling with lawyers and clients. Rachel met us in a small conference room, her laptop open to a draft of the lawsuit. "We're suing the HOA for wrongful death due to negligence," she explained, her voice steady. "The evidence is strong, Emily's video, Sarah's statement, and the 911 call logs showing the delay. But the HOA's lawyer is already pushing back, claiming Karen acted within her authority." I felt my stomach twist. "Authority to let someone die?" I asked, my voice rising. Rachel nodded grimly. "That's their defense. But we'll prove their policies were reckless." Tom spoke up, his voice quiet but firm. "Linda loved this community. She'd sit on our porch every evening, waving at neighbors, sharing her garden tips. She didn't deserve to die because of a gate code." I saw Rachel's expression soften, and I knew Tom's words would resonate with the jury. As we left the courthouse, I felt a mix of nerves and determination. This wasn't just about Linda anymore. It was about every resident in Maple Grove, every family who deserved to feel safe, not trapped. When I got home, I found a printed letter from the HOA slipped under my door. It was Karen's statement, typed in stiff, formal language. The Maple Grove Estates HOA deeply regrets the incident involving Mrs. Thompson, but all protocols were followed to ensure community safety. We are reviewing our policies and ask for patience during this time. I crumpled the paper in my fist, my blood boiling. Regrets? That wasn't an apology, it was a dodge. I texted the group chat. Karen's statement is a joke. We keep pushing. Emily replied, agreed. Let's plan a protest for Saturday. That evening, I sat on my couch, watching the sunset through my window. The neighborhood looked the same, manicured lawns, kids on bikes, but it felt different. We were a community in rebellion, united by loss and a shared goal. I thought of Linda's smile, her pecan pie, her quiet kindness, and I knew we couldn't stop. Maple Grove was changing, and I was ready to lead the charge, no matter how long it took.